Other than some of the new programming at the Edwards campus, I don't know that we've had that much influence on it yet. I think as their workplaces are changing, I think we need to react to that, and we need to build in, or as we're working on, more experiential learning opportunities, which helps with those soft skills that they talk about, which is really about collaboration, communication, writing, is really what they talk about when they talk about soft skills. And so creating opportunities for our students to experience those environments as they come through, not waiting until they're a junior to do an internship before they go out, but actually starting much earlier in the educational process to help. And those are skills that will serve you well no matter what you decide to go do in your career. And so it only makes sense to start to build those into our curriculum. And then I'd say the other places where they have had some influences is where there's tremendous shortages, and cybersecurity is an example of that. There's not a company in the country right now that's not looking for cybersecurity folks, as is the government and everybody else. I mean, it's just such a huge problem, and that's not we didn't even talk about programming in cybersecurity 5 years ago. So we're playing a bit of catch up as a country right now on that, and I think things like that will continue to surface as well.
I get the interface between public education and business and industry, but there's another large sector out there called the service industry, and social workers and psychologists and educators. Where is KU in terms of its awareness of and focus on providing people for that sector of our community?
I would probably argue that that's an area that we've been the best at historically, that we've been much more connected to historically, and we don't want to lose that. But I think that has been a historical focus of ours, and I think we've done a reasonably good job in some areas of that, social work being a great example of that. School of Social Welfare is very highly respected and has been very, very impactful as an example. And you know, on the healthcare side, that's what we're all about. I mean, I think in a number of elements of our university, we've taken that very seriously, probably much more so, and probably appropriate for a public institution that we've taken that very seriously.
Interesting.
So, yes, sir.
I got out of here in 4 years. But you know, while I got out, I had a wonderful set of advisors, and they were all teachers. And that kept me from making mistakes of choosing courses that wouldn't get me out in 4 years. Is there still a teacher advisor for each student at the university, or has that system all been dismantled?
I think it's a little bit different school by school. I think certainly some of the smaller schools are still able to do that. I think in the college, everybody has an advisor. I don't know if they also have a faculty advisor. I actually couldn't answer that question.
I think it is school dependent.
Yeah, they've figured out, each school has been allowed to develop their own advising models. And in some, they're professional advisors, if you will, which are usually fairly recent graduates who've maybe still working on a graduate degree. And in others, they have both that and a faculty member.
I think I have managed to have everyone believe me as a liar, because I tell them I got out of 4 years of KU in 1959 for the total price to the dime of $7,200. And they look at me like I'm crazy.
You are.
Yeah, but
That's making not true.
Let me also affirm that I'm paying in my legacy to the university for what I didn't pay back then and should have probably. Does that make sense? Sure.
Great point. Ma'am, you had a question?
I just wondered how the ratio of foreign students, has it held steady, or has it gone up or down in the last few years? Are students still wanting to come to KU from abroad?
It's, you know, and there's, I'll talk about the national trend and then the local trend. So nationally, we're down about 17% in international students. And in the Midwest, we're down about 30% in international students. At KU, we're down about, I think it's around 7%.
How much?
7. So I don't know what this year's numbers are yet. It looks like we might be down a little bit on the graduate side and up a little bit on the undergraduate side. But my guess is we're going to be fairly flat this year. And so there's been a very much a national shift around that for a number of different reasons, which you all read about every day. But it's not necessarily easy for all of them to get here either. We're still where they want to come. There's no question about it. But we haven't necessarily made it that easy for them most recently. And that has a big impact on us. You know, our graduate programs tend to be the best in the world and tend to draw from around the world. And historically, we've retained a lot of those really bright minds here in America to our benefit. And that's getting harder to do as well. So it's again, I think all this is going to come to a bit of a crisis as we continue down this path of a manpower shortage. It's going to take any and every pathway we have to address that, and you can't reverse a birth rate in 2 years, so it's going to take a while. I'm going to go to a new one.
Okay, I have been retired since 2000. I still have contact with younger people who are teaching. And they are suffering from a problem that their students who come into the class are not prepared and do not have the prerequisites. And we also have a large number of faculty members, for whatever reason, who give all A's to their students and do not require them to really learn the basics that they should have to the next level. And this whole situation seems to be breaking down to not bring people up with the fundamentals that you need to learn. If you're going to have to learn 7 different lives, you've got to have your fundamentals there to do that.
Well, I guess I can't speak to the great inflation side of that. I haven't experienced that, but that doesn't mean it might not occur. But you know, we've also changed our admission standards a few years back, and did that quite intentionally because if you use just the basic criteria of a GPA, high school GPA and an ACT score, you can predict degrees of success for those students. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of them socioeconomic. But the reality is, you know, the kids at the lower end of that spectrum succeed at a low rate. And you can argue both sides of that. One is that some do succeed, and so you don't want to take that opportunity away. But if they're succeeding at a rate of 15 to 20%, that's a big investment for that risk of not succeeding here. And that was really the rationale behind starting to raise the admission standards. And we've done that, and we have had every year, including this year, the most academically talented freshman class in our history. Highest ACT, highest GPA, 3.64, I think, for the freshmen on average. But we also, you know, are now taking a pause to look back and say, well, who are we leaving behind in this process? And and the reality is there are some folks that through predictive analytics, we ought to be able to figure out who of those at least have a pretty good chance of succeeding, and then what resources would we need to put around them to help them succeed? Because you don't want to leave out a segment of society either. So we've done the one part, and I'm sure it's not perfect, but it's better. And now we need to take a look again at that decision and say, okay, now how can we at least help some of those in that other category get a KU degree, be successful, and go on and change their lives?
Well, I think another side of that argument, quite frankly, is you can't expect, I think as a faculty member, you can't expect your students to be a monolithic group all coming with looking the same. And I think good teachers are capable of understanding there are going to be some young folks who are less prepared, and that we have to learn to do some things with them in the class to help them to learn in that context. We can't expect them all to come with the ACT scores of 29 or 30.
Right.
And
Right.
I think good teachers have to have some flexibility in understanding that diversity that's going to be in front of them, no matter what the subject.
And there's some advantage to that diversity as
Absolutely.
well. There's a way to leverage that to the benefit of the whole class.
Absolutely.
So I would agree with you on that. I know it gets hard as people get busier and, you know, the pressures on time are immense. And so,
Hard work.
so to figure out how to provide some of the resources to do that would be part of it.
I wanted to ask a question about the flipped classroom concept that I think falls in line with a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. It seems almost kind of like the solution to a lot of these issues, like with having students on a spectrum of being prepared for college. And I think that's the idea of the bell curve with grades. You have some really high and some really low and most of them in the middle. But what it sounds like you're saying is that maybe when there's too much on the low end, what do you do instead of saying you can't come to this school?
Right.
Like making specific programs to try to make people who aren't as prepared while they're here. But the flipped classroom, I think, is a big part of that because you are using groups usually, and so that has students talking to each other and sharing their own knowledge with each other, and so that's why it can be so problematic to have the lecture style classrooms, which I think comes back to, but all of the classrooms are set up for lectures. So I don't know, I've been in lots of lectures where it's just physically not
Right.
possible to be in groups, but that would be better.
And that's a transition that's going to happen over many years, obviously, right? And it also takes a different curriculum, and it takes a different skill set to teach that class in that way. And not all classes are amenable to it.
So I guess my question is, how do you, with knowing that that would be more effective in solving a lot of the things that we've been, or not solving, but, you know, aiding a lot of the issues that are going on with the changing way that education is set up now. With knowing that, what do you do about it?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the Center for Teaching Excellence, which Dia Greenhood runs, and she's working with about 60 programs, 60 classes a year to convert. And conversion means different things for different kinds of classes. What I described is one version of it. There's several other versions. But they have the curricular expertise to do that, and then they give out grants, and it's completely across the university. I went to their year-end this last fall. We had folks from the AAU here. They'd never seen anything like it. So I think it's really been very effective. And it really is problem solving through everything from content delivery methodology to that DFW rate and how do you get that down. And even to the point of one of the physics professors had done a project, and you know, physics is required for a lot of different fields. But nobody had ever gone to ask the question, why? What is it? Why is physics required for engineering? Well, there's an answer to that, but nobody had ever asked the question. When you start to find out what those are, they pulled together sort of the core elements of curriculum of physics that were most important to all these places. Most of them are not going to be physicists. They're going to be something else. So with that, then they really flipped how they taught the course in terms of even the order of the content, and started with the high-level concepts, which is really what people needed, not solve the formula. And they ultimately got to that, and then they found that, in fact, the people who benefited from that the most were those folks at the other end of the spectrum. These kids were going to do okay no matter how you did it. They're going to figure it out. But the ones who didn't have the background in it or the preparation in it, they more than doubled their success rate. It was amazing. And so it's taking that approach to education, but literally it's one class at a time. At 60 is a lot, but it's not when you have over 200 degree programs. So, you know, it's going to take some time. One more, and then I've actually got to run across the street.
I'm ready to have you conclude, but I want to say very positively that if we are indeed the second largest employer in the state, that you ought to have the privilege, and ask for the privilege if you need to do what you did here in front of the largest group of state legislatures that can you gather in a room, because this is really instructive. And if the lights don't go on in their head, maybe I would believe in capital punishment. I'm not sure.
Well, I want to reassure you that we are out there doing that. I've got 40 legislative visits scheduled. I'm already about halfway through that. I've met with all 3 of the governor's candidates. I would say all 3 were pretty ignorant on all of this. So that was very beneficial. And we will continue to push hard. And I'm very grateful. Our chair of the Board of Regents, for the first time in the time that I've been around, about 10 years, is very active out there telling the same story. So we're making a hard push this year because we just have to.
Well, you do,
Thank you
do
very
a
much.
fabulous job. You're in the big picture.
Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate the opportunity.